We are very happy to welcome Steve Okun into the studio. First time in 2.5 years. Steve, welcome back.
You know, I feel just like your listeners. I'm sitting here in the dark.
And, we're all in the dark, literally and figuratively speaking.
Yes.
Well, great to have you back, Steve. And thanks for making the effort to come in this morning. Living with the endemic, we are going to talk first about the ASEAN summit that just concluded in the U.S. It was on Thursday and Friday. President Biden got everybody together for the first time since 2016 in the U.S. Talk to us, give us the overview of how that went, that meeting.
In this visit, they took the members of the leaders of ASEAN, or the 8 of who were there, like to Capitol Hill to understand the political dynamics going on. But I think the leaders here are going to say, right, well, we have our own political dynamics. We understand you have a tough time on trade with labor unions and with the protectionists now, not just in the Democratic Party, but in the Republican Party. But you've got to work through that. I mean, we understand it, but we can't sit around and wait. And it was very interesting. Bloomberg had an article this week, and the headline in that article was Biden's fear of big trade deals. They then changed the headline to say Biden's no-show on trade deals. And a really interesting distinction. Was Bloomberg right the first time in saying there's a fear in the United States of trade deals?
Brilliant. Do you know, I'm loving Steve's insight. 2 things. One, I feel we're much harder on him when he's in the studio.
It's great.
I like that, Glenn. We need to keep that going.
That's
2,
good.
it's very hard to say, take what he's saying seriously when we all look like we're
in the
recording
dark
hostage videos. Please release us, hostage videos. But I'm going to, seeing as you're in the studio, and we've talked about Biden quite a lot, I'm going to put you on the spot. In the studio, first time, give us a scorecard. How has Biden done for you so far?
And here's, like, when it comes to the number one issue, is it Biden and what he has done for Asia Pacific versus what Trump has done for Asia Pacific? And I would take Biden 10 times out of 10 when it comes to his engagement in Asia Pacific to date. He is doing what needs to get done, and that is work with allies, work with partners. Everything that the Trump administration did was bilateral. It was to leverage the U.S. economic power over the countries they were in. And the Biden approach is completely opposite. Now, if you're going to say, how has he done in his first year and a half, he's 1/3 through his term, he hasn't chalked up any wins on the economic and trade front. But that's not anything the the Trump administration did. And it's not anything the Obama administration did. So what we need to do now is push to get them to move forward. The United States has not signed a new significant trade agreement in Asia Pacific in over a decade.
Wow.
The last one was the US-Korea FTA.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is a long-term failure of the United States. Look, kudos to the Obama administration for trying. They actually signed the TPP, but then, of course, President Trump pulled out 3 days in. But we've got to get back into the trade game. And that's what, again, we did this event with Ambassador Tommy Coe at the American Club. Asians live for trade. That's what they want. The U.S. is doing exactly the opposite and has been doing exactly the opposite, other than the one effort that ended up failing of the
I had no idea about that decade-long trade. I had no idea.
Steve, yesterday I was hosting a webinar with AMRO and the ASEAN +3 macroeconomic organization and the Asian Development ADB for the Philippines, and everybody that was on that on the panel all talked about RCEP and how RCEP is so important to this region. Where is the U.S. on RCEP right now, which is that other comprehensive trade agreement?
Well, the U.S. has zero chance of joining RCEP, and the reason for that is because RCEP is an ASEAN-led agreement. The U.S. does not have any real trade agreements, certainly with countries like Laos and Cambodia, and not much of one yet with Indonesia, really. So the U.S. is going to be blocked out of RCEP for quite some time. And the fact that China is in it will of course complicate that too. The U.S. could be coming back to the TPP, which then became the comprehensive,
CPTPP.
But that's
confusing.
And that's where the U.S. is out of that now too. So this is what IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, is trying to do. And that is where where the U.S. really needs to start engaging much more on trade and not just be symbolic. It's going to take time, but we now have really got to get something. Everybody's screaming for a digital trade agreement, because that's the one that's the lowest hanging fruit. Singapore's already in a couple of them. You can build upon those, and you can make a very strong argument that digital trade is what SMEs in the United States need to be able to access this region. And that's what we're really pushing hard for in the business community.